Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory. I have on the line today Mr. Tim Brown from Freedom Outpost. And Freedom Outpost is a massive website with a huge following. And Tim and I get into a wide variety of topics today. It's a fireside chat, and we're going to join it already in progress. And I hope you stick around to the end because I think you're going to love it. Thank you very much, and here we go. There's not been a declaration of war since, I believe,
I was
Korea.
thinking it was World War. I didn't even know it was Korea. I thought it
Well,
was like World War II.
it might be World War II. I know that you're right. That was the last true declaration of war.
Yeah,
That
I'm wondering
Congress
what
voted on it.
but they did something. They voted on something in both of those things because I remember Ron Paul speaking about it.
Well, now
And
with Libya, they I believe that there was a resolution passed to say, we'll do this kinetic.
I don't think they had anything for Libya. I think they had something for Iraq.
Oh,
But
yes,
Libya,
for
but Libya, they were crawling him on the carpet because he took troops in there and he gave support. Because I had a thing from I think it was Sessions. He was really blasting Panetta about that, and Panetta he says, "Well, don't you think the Constitution says something about you having to come get authorization from Congress to go to war?" And he goes, "Well, we," and he him hauled around, and he basically said he was basically saying the international coalition trumps the Constitution. And you should have seen the look on Sessions' face. It was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, these people they're so out of control, and they no longer represent the law. They are merely acting above the law, and there is no recognition of law
Oh, sure.
unless it applies to someone else like you and I. Now
Yeah.
the full force of the law is not only recognized but is instituted against us. But as far as what they're doing, there is no law. There's
Yeah.
no rule of law whatsoever.
Well, and that's part of the thing that, I just put up this thing with Nancy Pelosi. I don't know if you saw that little 16-year-old guy.
I just got home a minute ago, and I'm seeing that now, and it says
Yeah,
a
that,
16-year-old Andrew uh, Demeter
yeah.
won a documentary contest on C-SPAN. As a result, he was given the opportunity to interview Representative Nancy Pelosi. One of his questions was with regard to the National Security Agency spying program, something that Pelosi has consistently fought for. Her response is laden with babbling and blaming Bush. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's an interesting thing. I mean, it's just a short little thing that he caught. But she's like, oh well, because he asked her about funding, and she says, well, there's some good things in there, for this, that, and the other. Okay, but why do you that question still stems? Why do you keep dodging the question and funding them when they're doing things that are violating the Constitution? And she doesn't believe the things that they're doing are violating the Constitution. That's the thing. He has specifically the Fourth Amendment, and she rejected and lobbied against the Amash Amendment or the resolution that he had last year, and just it makes you want to go up there and wring somebody's neck. It just
yeah.
really does.
I don't know if you've listened to that interview that Sean and I just did with Jeff Nielsen, but man, Sean was fired up over that. I mean, it's a good thing that they weren't within arm's reach because I believe somebody would have he would have choked somebody. He was Lord. I mean, if you listen to that, if you just listen to it, you can hear it in his voice how upset he is over all of it, and with good reason. I mean, these guys, like I
Oh,
said a
sure.
minute ago, they're so far out of control at this point, and it's people like Nancy Pelosi and her, Orwellian doublespeak. Well, it's a good thing, and it's nice, and it's kind, and which is exactly. There was an article that I just wrote yesterday, and the name of it is that you can never ever use the word inflation ever, and it was because of this mainstream media newscast that my wife and I were watching, and they were in the the article was about inflation, but
Right.
they never even went into the neighborhood of using the word inflation. It was all this happy doublespeak, about smaller packages and reduced this, all of these words that point your mind in a particular direction.
Sure.
That smaller is good and reduced is good and lighter is good, when in fact the item that they were using, Tim, and I'm not joking, it represented a 12.5% rate of inflation for that item.
I'm sure.
It was just incredible. The Orwellian doublespeak it's out of control. But I guess when propaganda has been legalized, like it was a couple of years ago, then
Yep.
hey, it's all good.
Yeah, well, and not only that, I recall somebody talking about the gasoline, and they were saying, "Why is the price of gasoline going up so much?" And they said, "It's not. The price actually is the same, but it's the inflation that's come along behind it."
Yep.
Now, some of that I kind of wondered at, and at the same time, you get into some of these debates like we had in 2012, and Mitt Romney was trying to, beat Obama with the oil thing. And I do think we ought to be energy independent, but I think we're pretty much there. From what I understand, we're exporting more oil than we're importing, which begs the question of why do that?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
Unless you're making more money by exporting it. I mean, that would make a business sense, I guess, but
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense to me. If your goal is to be energy independent, and of course we don't want government to tell businesses, well, you can only sell in the United States. We certainly don't want that. But at the same time, if that is the goal, then why aren't we there if we're exporting more than we're importing?
But isn't oil considered a strategic resource?
It is.
Why wouldn't the government be able to dictate where that product is going? I mean,
Yeah, well,
I understand where you're going with, not telling business how to run their business,
sure.
but as far as a strategic resource,
Yeah, I think probably you could say that as far as if you're going to be involved in something like these sanctions and stuff like that, which again I tend to agree with Ron Paul on that you end up hurting the people of that country who you don't really have a beef with versus the people that you're really angry at, which is their leadership.
right?
So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's sort of a questionable thing.
I mean, I don't want any. I don't think that government should have any business in anyone's business,
Sure.
or a voice in Exxon's business or my business or your business,
Right.
but just using their type of thought process and their Orwellian doublespeak. If this is considered a strategic resource, why wouldn't they dictate who gets it and who doesn't?
Yeah. The thing that concerns me about that is where some of these executive orders have gone in recent years of saying, what was the things? All natural resources, property, and things of this nature, the federal government can take control of in a state of emergency. Um, well, that's sort of the thing. That is to me that gets to be the question, and maybe we should reevaluate that strategic resource labeling of oil. Maybe we should actually do that because I think that to me it sort of smacks of the what Ayn Rand was talking about in the Atlas Shrugged, and that was that the government can come in and they can tell you, well, you got to give us oil before you give anybody else oil, or you've got to give these people that before you do something else. And I guess that's my concern. You give them that little bit of authority, and it never stops there. They continue to grab. So I'm like, businesses got a pretty good eye on things, and I think probably the free market would probably be best to determine that stuff.
Yes, and you get no argument from me on that. I really believe that the free market will determine, where the levels belong.
Sure,
Period.
I think so too. John Stossel had a great thing. I don't know if you saw it after Hurricane, whatever that thing was, Sandy. And he was just showing how, you know, when you go into a situation like that, he says, think about, for instance, this flashlight. He says it's like $2 or $3, but he says, you get in a hurricane, you don't have light stuff. Now all of a sudden that flashlight's limited, and now it's $30. And he says what it does is, one, it tells the market, hey, look, we're low on flashlights here. We need more flashlights, so the market has to produce them. The second thing it does is it causes people to evaluate what they're going to spend their limited resources on. Am I going to spend that $30 on a flashlight, or would I rather spend the $30 on food?
Yep.
And use a candle?
Exactly.
That kind of thing. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the more you can have government out of it, the better off. And I really struggle over the ideas of monopolies. I don't think people ought to be able to go in and do things that are illegal or done just, and I don't want to say just to spite small business, because that can get real subjective. But say they go in to companies that would provide for a lot of small businesses, and a bigger business come in and say, well, I want these, and I'll sign a contract with you, and then they're not able to provide for small businesses. But in the end, they won't fulfill the full contract. They'll kind of scale that back a little bit for whatever their needs are for a period of time. And what it ends up doing is putting out, competition. And I think even Walmart has been guilty of, some of those kinds of things.
Well, they're guilty of just about everything.
That's true. But they're, they provide a lot of jobs. I wish they were more along the lines of Sam Walton's ideals now, which they aren't, being more, American friendly and providing a lot of more American made goods. But what can you do?
Yeah, I'm really not a big fan of Walmart. I mean, ever since Sam Walton passed away, I think that whole thing went by the wayside.
Yeah, I think it becomes the bottom line. That's why I've always encouraged people. I don't know if you've read a book, and I know you need to record someday, but
I'm recording now.
Well, boy, I'm in trouble if I said something I didn't mean to.
No.
There is a book by a guy. It's called, I believe it's called In Search of God in Guinness, Stephen Mansfield, and it's on the Guinness Beer Company. And that is a fascinating read of how Christians should run their business, and I think it can apply even to non-Christians. I think they can learn something from it. And in the Guinness industry, I think the guy, I think when it's been a couple of years since I read the book, but I think when he signed a lease over there in Ireland for the place where he was going to start his beer company, I think his first lease was like for 7,000 years or something. He had a very optimistic outlook. It was ridiculous. And he came into the community, and one of the things you'll find interesting is they took, and their workers were the best paid workers in all of Ireland. And yet, even at that, many of them still lived in pretty much a squalor. They were, cramped in their houses and stuff like this. But this guy, Mr. Guinness, would pay his employees 1 week's vacation, and then he would pay them to go on that vacation. He had, I think, 2 in-house doctors on call 24 hours a day to deal with, factory workers. If they hurt themselves, this, that, and the other, they could be checked out, take care of their families. And he had not a 24-hour, but he had a masseuse who was also on staff to also help take care of, any kind of injuries that could be taken care of with that. And he died, and there were black sheep in the family, but there was good people who carried on the name, and they grew the company, but they also continued to look after the people. And I remember reading one of the guys was I think it was 1 or 2 generations down the road, but they brought in a guy who, evaluated the home lives of the people. And, some of them were living like 10 in a house where really it was suited for about 4. and they had bad plumbing, so you got sewage issues, and then you would get diseases and stuff. And this guy recommended to them to go in and company do it, build housing for your employees and put them up, and they did. And they had a small turnaround. They made their employees really happy. They did it without government coercion. They turned out a good product, and they had healthy employees. And it was all done under business. It was all done under the ownership of the business. It had nothing to do with government. It really had nothing to do with charity. It was just, this is how the business wanted to run itself. And they really believed if we took care of our employees, they'll in turn take care of us. That's been sort of my thinking, and one of the things I even told the guy who hired me for Freedom Outpost. I told him, I said, my philosophy is if I do a good job and I work hard and I make you a lot of money, my hope is you're going to be a good boss and reward me with some of that.
Right.
And that's the way I've been throughout my work history in thinking the same way. So, but today we get a lot of greed on one side or the other, and it isn't just business owners. Sometimes it's employees. Sometimes employees are getting paid really good, and they just really want more. So it can affect both.
Well, I think that the company SAS, which is a software company,
okay,
out of Germany, I think that they're running a program very, very similar to what you described that Guinness was doing or is currently doing. And 60 Minutes actually did a profile on them.
Oh, wow.
Talked to the employees. They were trying to paint this picture of, this is evil, this is bad. And it's because this is one of the largest software companies in the world, if not the largest software company. And they are privately owned. And at that time, Wall Street did not have their fangs in them. So
right.
So they were trying to paint them in this really bad light, even though everybody they talked to said, "Well, no, we're perfectly happy. we like the house that we're able to buy through our company. We like the fact that when I go to work, there's daycare for my children, and that there's a doctor on staff, and that it doesn't matter that they deduct the money from my pay. What's the difference?
Yeah, I'm getting a good deal on it.
Right. I'm getting a great deal, and it's right there."
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure they have the option to opt out of that if they want.
They do. They don't have to participate in any of it.
Yeah, so see, to me, that's a thing where you have free market, because if somebody can go to work for a company like that, if they have the opportunity to do that, well, then the company over here that's going to pay them, $10, $12, $20 an hour, whatever the case may be, with nothing on it, well, what are they going to shoot for? Well, they're going to shoot for the guys who are going to take care of them long term.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that's another thing where free market comes in. I mean, you're not only fighting for consumers with your pricing, but you're fighting for your employees with what you provide them to turn out your product.
Well, I want to change gears a little bit, just based on what we were just talking about, and specifically healthcare. I mean, do you think that there's a chance that Obamacare is going to be repealed, or do you think that we're just stuck with it?
If I'm honest, I think that we're stuck with it, because I don't think that Republicans want to get rid of it. If you listen to Mitt Romney, his was, we want to repeal it, but we want to replace it.
Right.
Well, I think that's the wrong kind of thinking in the first place. What business does the federal government have in any of that? We didn't give them authority to deal with our health care, nor to mandate that we have it.
To mandate that we have it.
Yeah, the mandate that we have it. And that's what people have to understand. It's not even that, and I'm using probably the wrong words here, it's not even that he's mandating that we have health care. It's mandating we have health insurance. And so a lot of people thought, well, Obamacare is going to go through, I'm getting free health care. No. Well, you're going to get either one of two things. You're going to get a really screwed up health care plan that's going to cost you more money than it was, or you're going to be stuck on Medicaid, which you might not be paying as much for. You might even get free, but somebody's going to pay for it. You're going to get it free, but somebody's going to pay for it. And so I think the issue is not that anybody wants to get rid of that. I think the issue is one side they're fighting for control of it. Right. So I'm happy to hear that people want to continue to fight, and I'm all behind you to fight it. I really am. But man, let's be realistic. It's been a few years now that thing's been law. And the more we see it with every kind of welfare program that comes down the pike from the federal government, the longer it stays in, the more it's set to be there.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard is it to get rid of Social Security? And that is a scheme. That is a Ponzi scheme. It's been that from the start. It has never been about putting money back for people with interest and all this other. It's about paying ahead for other people. And for those who want to argue with me and say, well, I need my Social Security check, I paid into it. No, you didn't. You're like I am. You're paying for the people in front of you. And the thought or the idea behind it is you're paying for the people in front of you because somebody had to start it and they didn't pay anything in. So you're paying for the people in front of you with the understanding that the government's basically going to hold the gun to the head of the people behind you to make them pay for yours. And that's really where it gets to. I mean, it's a sad reality. One lady didn't like me pointing that out, but I said, that's how this thing works. We think we're paying into it for us, but we have to go back and look at how it's structured and how it was set up. We're always paying for the people ahead of us.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it is complete welfare. It is called an entitlement because you're paying into it, but it really is welfare. It really is.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that they're stealing my money.
Me either.
You know, but as far as Obamacare, I mean, they've got what scares me about that more than anything is the fact that it is 100% tied to the IRS.
Yes.
That's the part that really terrifies me, and that there's a whole branch of the IRS that is specifically for dealing with healthcare. And it's like, I must have missed something here because I didn't realize that the Internal Revenue Service and healthcare were buddies. But now all of a sudden, not only are they buddies, they're
armed buddies.
Exactly. and they're armed. They're armed to the teeth.
Yes.
And now they've hired all of these new agents, and I guess they hired them for a reason.
Well, yeah, and I think this gets back to some of the things of what my friend David had pointed out, and some of the stuff I saw in the film America, Freedom, Fascism, and the guy who did that, Aaron Russo. Yeah, and his things that he would put to the IRS. And I think if we would stand together and say, you know what, if I don't have corporate gains, if I don't have any kind of profit, I'm not filing a tax return. Now, that sounds lawless, but the thing is really when you watch those guys push the IRS guys, the head of the IRS, I think Aaron Russo interviewed, and he couldn't point to the law where a person had to file a 1040.
Right.
What he said was, what he wanted to do was point to the 16th Amendment and say, well, Congress can now tax, they can tax however they want to. Okay, well, that's fine, but that doesn't get down to I have to file a 1040. And that's sort of the thing that he was putting out. And I think there was a Washington jury who found a gentleman, innocent because he didn't file a 1040. And they were trying to go after him. And they were like, can you show us the law? And it was like the lady in the video said that the judge was just stunned when they came back with the verdict because he wouldn't give them the law. He kept saying, "Well, I'll give you stuff," and he would never get them. And they kept asking, and they said, "Well, he hasn't violated any law here." And the whole thing was about him not filing his tax returns.
Right.
So I think it's a thing of people becoming educated, and so many laws get passed, we can't keep up with them. Heck, the people who pass them don't even read them, so we know they can't keep up with them.
Right. Well, the thing is that, and there's a difference, because you keep talking about laws being passed. There hasn't been any new laws passed in a long time. They're all bills and they're all acts.
Right, or amendments of some sort to laws. Yeah,
exactly, because a law is those three things are completely different one from the other. And
right, the Obamacare law is a law. It's not particularly. I mean, it's one that's instituting all kinds of stuff, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, we see what happens with that. I think some of the things that get passed where there's amendments and stuff is just boggles my mind, because I was looking at I've looked at several of these things online, and half the time I can't make heads or tails out of them, because they say, well, we're going to strike this paragraph from section whatever, and we're going to add this in, and then they go to another section. I mean, for somebody to go through that, I think Rand Paul was one who pointed out, he says, you need like a day for every, so many pages, and it wasn't a lot of them, just to go through it to see what it's even saying.
Which is nothing. When it gets down to it, it says, you give us all of everything that you have.
Exactly.
And then we'll give you back what we think you deserve.
Exactly.
And that's the bottom line. But
yeah, and we've given them that, we've emboldened them to be like that.
Yes.
By putting the same kinds of mentality of people into office. And I'm all for, you know what, I'd soon trust my neighbor who's a farmer than I would a lawyer, a doctor, any of those guys. I mean, I just really would. Well, and I know every man's susceptible to temptation and bribery and all that, but I just think those people have been the ones who've lived, regular life like most people.
Yes.
I think they'd be the best representatives.
And the thing is that I think that a big part of the problem is that we keep re-electing people. Is that we keep them in there.
Sure.
And instead of rotating them out and getting them out, I mean, it becomes their job, and it's not their job.
Yep.
And that's where the real problem comes in, because the lobbyists are able to just continue to work their magic with them.
Right.
And I think that's where the real problem is. So, I mean, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and Lindsey Graham, and Lamar Alexander, all of these people, they need to go. Jim Cooper,
sure.
They need to go. They need to go.
They do. Now, if we could just get everybody to see that, I think most people just go to the polls and they recognize a name, and that's the guy they're going to vote for. I think that's where all the advertising and stuff like that pays off for them.
Well, and I do the exact opposite. I look for and I'm dead serious. I look for the names that I do not recognize. Well, I don't know that person, so they must be doing something pretty good.
Well, I've often wondered that about a lot of people in Congress that you never see make the television or this, that, and the other. You kind of wonder, because some people say, well, name a bill they pass. Well, I don't want them passing stuff. I want them repealing stuff. I want them getting rid of stuff. Right. That's really the issue. I mean, for people who really want government, they mean what they say with the rhetoric of less government. It's fine if they want to not pass anything. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah, if they're my representative, that's exactly what I want. Don't pass anything. Start repealing all this stuff where they've, undermined the law of the land, and start getting rid of that. I'm all for that.
I would be all for there being a law that states that there can be no laws that are more pages than the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. That if you want to introduce a new law, a new bill, a new act into the Congress, then it has to be shorter or no more in length than the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Period.
Yeah, I've got a friend. He ran for Congress this year. He didn't win in the primaries. Richard Lynch in Gastonia, North Carolina, and that was one of his planks in his little platform there that he had was no longer than the Constitution was, that many words. And some people said, well, there was, I forget what the law was they mentioned, but they said, well, it was longer than that, but I don't remember exactly which one they said. But I tend to think the same thing because most of our laws end up undermining Constitution anyway.
Exactly.
Any of this spying stuff that's going on, where you do the metadata and all this other stuff. I think every one of these. This is one of the things I brought up with Lee Bright a couple of weeks ago when I spoke with him. He's running against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, and I said, look, you've shown yourself pretty steady in the state house, which is a good thing. I said, but when you get to Congress, I said, and you get budgets passed down and stuff, I said, what are you going to do with that? And he basically said, well, until they come under constitutional restraints, he says, I won't be able to vote for any of that. I was glad to hear that. I won't be able to vote for a budget because it's going to be full of things that are unconstitutional. And that's just one area. And now we're looking at that, Article 5 convention, and you've got several people really hyping that balanced budget amendment mess. And that is not going to help anything. It really isn't. Because it still does not limit the spending to what the Constitution authorizes. It simply says you can spend as much as you want on whatever you want as long as you got the tax revenue to cover it.
Right.
That's balancing it. And if you don't have the tax revenue to cover it, guess what they're going to do? Raise your taxes so they can have a balanced budget. So it does nothing. And this guy wanted to say, well, the states have implemented this. And I said, the states don't have the Federal Reserve printing their money either.
Right.
And I think that's the issue. I really do. I mean, people are willing. I get that good people can disagree on those things, but in the end, that's what's coming because we got a long track record of that from Congress.
Like I said a minute ago, they all need to go. We need some fresh. We need some new blood in Washington D.C. and we need to
get any argument from me.
And we need to rotate out. We need to rotate them in and out on a regular basis. No more than the length of the president. There should be term limits, and you got to go because there's so few people that are like Jesse Ventura, who had a self-imposed term limit.
Yeah,
that said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do a job, I'm going to leave. This is not my
George
job.
Washington. Yeah, or George Washington. Yeah, same kind of deal.
I mean,
I liked that. I did like that about Jesse. I thought that was good that he did that. I mean, there's things that I don't agree with him on, like anybody else, but I thought that was a good sign of at least some bit of integrity of what he claimed.
Well, I mean, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do.
Right.
And whether you agreed with his agenda or not, I mean, he did stick to it.
Yep, he did. There's no doubt about that. No doubt at all.
And it really, I think that it really upset a lot of people.
Well, of course.
I mean, in ways that and people that I don't think that he intended to upset. I mean, I think that there were a lot of people that looked at that and said, "Wait a minute, this guy's he's doing what he said he was going to do."
Yeah,
and he's not.
We can't be having that.
Exactly, and he's not taking the bribes.
Right.
He's not taking the dough under the table. So,
right.
And I think that I really think that caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah.
So, but that's just my take. I mean, I tend
to think there are some guys like that. Every once in a while they come along and they do exactly what they say, and we ought to we ought to pat them on the back for that. Really ought to applaud their effort and say, this is, this is how you ought to deal with things.
Well, I think we ought to pat you on the back, Tim, for
Me?
running. Yeah, absolutely, for having such a great website in Freedom Outpost. I think that the work that you and your staff are doing over there is unbelievable. You guys are
What?
moving mountains in a way that it's incredible. I
I
mean,
appreciate.
when we started this interview, I said that I made a comment that your website is growing in popularity every day. And I went and I looked at the Alexa numbers, and you guys are like 3,000 in the country, and you're way under the 5,000 mark, which is a huge mark. So you guys are getting some very heavy traffic over there, and I commend you for it, and you deserve it. I mean, you guys are doing you do a bang up job every day, day in, day out. Your site is one of my go-to sites, and the writers that you have in your writing is top shelf, my friend.
Well, I
So,
appreciate that.
like I
I
said,
appreciate that.
you deserve a pat on the back. If there's any patting on the back going around, y'all get in line and give Tim one.
Well, I appreciate that. When we started, I used to write all the articles. It was 8 or 10 I was pumping out a day, and
Jeez.
it wore me out. But I wanted to do well, and then God was very gracious, and He sent me one or two authors that would write here and there, and then I think it was sometime around last year we started getting some, consistent writers. Then we've had some of the sites, of course, some that you're familiar with. Max Slavo, I think
Yeah,
that's how you pronounce his name.
yeah, that's how I pronounce it. And
Yep.
shtfplan.com.
Yeah, he would contribute, and then Dean and I over at DC Clothesline, formed a real good thing. He had, he was kind of starting off, and I helped him out with a lot of stuff. And of course, he's a marketing guy anyway, so man, he has been just battling uphill for the past year, and I'm just amazed. I mean, he is right behind me with his rankings, and he doesn't even have some of the email pull that I do, and so he just integrates that with some good writers that contribute to him too, and I mean, to tell you the truth, yeah, I worked hard starting off, but it's the writers who really make Freedom Outpost what it is. There's a wide. I think overall we have a similar goal. There are some differences in how we view some things, and I don't want to kick somebody out for that because I want to bring them my view.
Right.
And of course, I think there's been at least one or two writers that maybe have even helped me in my understandings of things. So I've been very thankful for that. And then of course we've allowed for people to if there's somebody who disagreed, we've tried to give back and forth. We did that with Michael Ferris on the Parental Rights Amendment, and we did that with Nick Dranius with Compact for America over the Balanced Budget Amendment, as a matter of fact. And people seem to appreciate the fact that we wasn't just going to shut one guy up or shut one side down. We would allow that, and I sometimes get that from some people. Oh, you're trying to censor this, that, and the other. And I thought, man, militant homosexuals will pop in every once in a while, and you'll just have an influx of those people, unless they're just being nasty.
Yeah.
I pretty much let them engage in whatever they're doing, and hope people would behave like adults. I don't know.
Well, that's and that's commendable, because you have to allow people to be who they are.
Well, sure.
To a point. I mean, you
Yep.
can't allow, for the hate speech and all of that, but just because somebody has a different viewpoint, that actually, from my perspective, it should be welcomed.
Sure.
Because otherwise we don't have a dialogue. We just have.
Well, yeah, and that's true. That's true, and I think for the most part we've allowed that. Some people would call, "Why are you censoring my?" And I'm not doing it. It's happening through the whatever the commenting thing is, and I'll go in there and turn something on, or maybe they haven't had their settings right for the newest comment, so it goes to the bottom, and I'll tell them about that. But overall, I think going back and forth is good. The problem is that we're in such a polarized society now that if you say something that's a little bit off the talking point of whatever, thing that you're on, somebody thinks you're just a liberal or something, and you're not. You're just saying, I see this here just a little bit different. It's not that I'm completely against your point. It's just that, and I don't think that's helpful for people either to engage in, especially when you don't hear voice inflection, you don't see body language.
Right.
And so I think sometimes it's best to, ask people questions, see where they're coming from, and then if they're being a liberal, then you can call them out on it. But the other I think is good, and that's one of the things. I see a lot of stuff on Facebook and others where just stuff flares up for no reason.
Yep.
And that's a sad thing. But overall, I think people engage fairly well.
Well, I think that those flare-ups also come from the fact that it is an electronic communication, and it is devoid of all emotion. There is no emotion. It's just words on the screen.
Sure.
And so you don't get the body language, you don't get the facial gestures, you don't get the touch. You don't hear any tone and fluctuations. So you don't really have any understanding except your own. It's whatever mood. And when I was dealing with an office environment on a daily basis, I would go to my team on a regular basis and remind them that the only emotion that it will ever be in that email that you're getting ready to send is on the reader's part, and you have no idea what they are dealing with or
Sure.
what kind of day they're having. And that's really, I really don't like electronic communications.
I don't either. And I've had people think, well, boy, you're just this, that, and the other. And I'm like, no, I'm not angry at you. I just, I'm blunt sometimes, but I'm not angry. I recall, and this was even with voice. I don't know if I told you, but when Sean had me on the last time, I think it was right before Easter or something.
Yeah.
And we talked, and I simply said, I think, our roles as men and women are different. And I think, God's designed men for leadership. I'm not saying that women aren't capable of it. Obviously, He's given them great skills of management. And I think, they can do things in the home. And I'm not talking about just cooking and cleaning stuff. I'm talking about real management of the home.
Right.
And industry from the home that men, for the most part, we're just not geared toward. We're geared a different way. We're wired different. And, somebody came on there and said his misogyny just left me breathless. I couldn't even finish the interview. I was just like, what? But you lay things out, and people are going to hear it based on their thinking. You're right. What kind of day they've had, how they've been brought up, their training, and their thinking. And you're not meaning anything to be anything close to whatever they thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, they're not under attack.
Sure. Sure.
We're just having a pleasant conversation.
Exactly.
And
you share ideas.
Exactly. That's the thing is that that's what I meant a minute ago is if you don't have, people that disagree with you, how do you ever come up with something new? You don't.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's necessarily coming up with something new. I think it's coming up with things that are right, things that are true.
True.
Things
there
that
we
have
go.
and things that have been tested. Because, well, you know me, I hold Scripture as authority, and the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah, and I understand they didn't have telephones for a long time, but as far as the idea of communication, that's existed a long time. We're just using different tools. But those kinds of things, it's an expansion of that. It's an expansion on that old idea. And the same thing happens with these things. We talk about new ways, and I know what you're saying. But really, they come back to old principles when we start to look at them. They're based on old principles that have been tested and tried. And you're right, when we have debate with one another, when we engage one another in conversation, what we're doing is sort of checking one another. And so if I have an idea over here and I say, well, how would this work here? I think this would work here, and I'll lay it out and do that. And the person comes along and they say, well, you know what, this thing right over here has been tried over here, and this is why it won't work. Now, if I got something that says, well, it'll work because I'm integrating something else here, they might say, well, yeah, you got a point, or they might say, no, you need to scrap that part of it. And so I think, I think that's how you're sort of, you know, we talk about sharpening one another. That's sort of how you do with ideas. You sharpen the ideas, you bring them down, you let it open it up for sort of scrutiny, and see, you know, if it's a good idea or not.
That's what makes us human.
Sure.
Well, Tim, we've done it again. We're bumping almost an hour.
Well, I always enjoy it, Roy. I really do.
I do too. I love talking to you, and I could go another hour easily. And I'm not even joking. But I'm not going to take up any more of your time. And I want to thank everybody for listening. For the folks that are still with us, we appreciate you listening. And we've been visiting with Tim Brown over at Freedom Outpost. And please check out his site if it's not already in your bookmarks. And please check us out at thedailycoin.org. And Tim, with that, I will talk with you soon, my friend.
All right, brother. Take care of yourself.
You too, buddy. Talk to you later.
God bless.
Bye-bye.